Joining me now with more on the numbers and the road to recovery is Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia. Mr. Secretary, welcome. Good to have you with us. We will get to those furlough numbers, which are very important part of this. But first, I think the basic question most Americans want to know is this the worst we're going to see?
Well, it's bad, first of all. These are very difficult numbers for us to see, and this is just an exceptionally difficult period for the American people, for workers, for their families. These numbers reflect it. These numbers confirm what we knew about the challenges we're facing as we deal with the virus as we have. In terms of the road ahead, very fluid. We know that there were even more job losses later in April, early in May, but we now know that 30 states are in the process of reopening and people are going back to work. So there is a path ahead that's out of it. A path out of this. We know what that path is, and we've started down that path, but it's critical that we do so safely.
As we look at these job losses piling up, maybe, just maybe if we're lucky, there won't be another month with 20 million job losses. But that doesn't mean necessarily, does it, Mr. Secretary, that the unemployment rate couldn't bump up beyond this 14.7% and even bump up considerably?
It could go up. There are ways of looking at this data where the real number is higher than the 14.7%. But I think what's critical here is that these numbers tell a very different story than the kind of numbers that we've looked at in the past during a difficult economic period. First of all, because this was a choice we had to make to idle the economy to beat the virus. We came into this by a very different route. That's why we see millions of jobs suddenly vacant. But I think analogizing to past economic challenges is not going to work so well here. And I do have this one chart. We talked about the temporary jobs. This is the page in our jobs report today that most leaped out to me. I think your producer has it. And the red line in this chart is the temporary unemployed. Nearly 90% of the unemployed this past month believe that their loss was temporary. The challenge to us now is to make good on that expectation of the Americans who are out of work, to safely put them back in the workplace.
You can say that again, because if people are, and that is an amazing hockey stick kind of chart there, as you see people who self-describe as being furloughed. They expect to go back to work, but there is no guarantee there, is there, Mr. Secretary, that those people who self-identify as having been furloughed will be brought back to work? I raised the following from a restaurateur who says that he has been able to reopen nearly 200 restaurants in 10 different states. They are operating at about 25% of capacity. He sees that people just aren't coming back. They're still gun-shy about going out. And if those customers don't come back, a lot of those furloughed workers in the hospitality industry may be permanently unemployed, right?
Well, this is why, as we enter the reopening, we need to do so safely. That's been important to us at the Labor Department to assure safe workplaces. But, yeah, customers want things to be safe, too. I think if we do this reopening correctly, people will gain confidence. They'll be coming back. We know some of these jobs will come back very quickly. We lost 1.4 million positions in health care last month. But we know that those jobs will come back. They have to come back. And so I think a lot of these jobs that are shown as lost jobs are jobs that are there. They're waiting. And the task now is to safely bring people back. The president had us in a position where the economy was just roaring through February. And so we know the policies to get us there. And what we want to do now is safely bring people back to work, keep those policies in place of the tax cuts we had, reasonable approach toward regulation, and get that economy humming again.
So much to discuss here, and I'm really enjoying the conversation. Honestly, I really am. Obviously, coming back jobs in the medical profession is one thing. Coming back in hospitality is going to be another.
It'll take longer.
It will take longer. We have to. But But let's pray that chart is right and that those furloughed workers actually are going to come back to work. Let me cover a couple of things because you talked about bringing workers back safely. Just a quick note here. Earlier this week, you and AFL-CIO chief Mr. Trumka exchanged some tart communications over his request that OSHA extend some warnings or some prescriptions having to do with airborne risks in the workplace. Could you tell us why you responded the way you did to Mr. Trumka and why you disagree with what he is calling for?
OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, is part of the Labor Department, has been focused on COVID-19 in the workplace from extremely early on, providing extensive guidance. I think we have nearly 20 different documents out now providing guidance, very focused now on safe reopening in a variety of industries. We also have enforcement tools that, if we have to, we'll use in the case of companies that aren't keeping their workers safe. Very important to us. President Trump and I have a disagreement about the exact means to proceed here. We think the plan we're using, guidance, enforcement if we need to, is the right approach. I think what's a mistake is there's some people out there, former Obama administration people, saying OSHA isn't doing anything. That's just flatly untrue. OSHA staff are working extremely hard to keep our workers safe. American people need to know that. So do American business owners. They need to know how seriously we're taking this.
Along the same lines as we talk about reopening the economy, earlier this week, the administration sent back basically for further review some guidelines that have been promulgated by the Centers for Disease Control. And the reason they were sent back for further reviews is they were regarded by some, I gather, as overly prescriptive. Were you a part of that review decision? And did you see the guidelines? And what did you think of them?
I'm not sure exactly what particular document is being referred to there. Obviously, there are documents being passed among agencies for review all the time. That's an essential and healthy process to make sure that all the different perspectives that bear on a safe reopening are considered. So I think you'll continue to see important documents coming out from OSHA, from the Labor Department, and from the CDC on how we safely reopen. 2 weeks ago, we cooperated with the CDC in putting out these important guidelines, for example, on how to make workers in the meatpacking plants.
So let me make sure I'm understanding here, because I don't want to get confused. You're not certain which CDC guidelines I'm referring to, and you weren't part of the decision to send them back or to stall those guidelines in any way.
I see a variety of documents. I've seen a variety of documents that included CDC. Not my job to comment on particular rumors of leaked documents and the like, but there's a healthy process there to make sure that we communicate just rightly to the American people.
And finally, Mr. Secretary, two questions that are, I guess, very related. What happens when the PPP money ends? It's supposed to be paid out by June 30th. And at that point, what happens, number one? Number two, and this is one of some controversy, I have a niece who works in radiology in hospitals out on Long Island. And she says that she's still working, but she is earning a lot less than people who were laid off and furloughed and are collecting unemployment benefits, including the $600 federal supplement. There is not an inducement for them to come back to work. Is that a problem? And if not, why not?
The president and Congress acted so quickly to provide relief to American workers during this pause in our economy. PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, as you know, was one part of that. I think it's been an enormous success with, I believe, 4 million loans now made through that program, tens of millions of workers getting the benefit of it. We'll see where we are as the end of June approaches. I think we will have made significant headway in the reopening by then. The second issue you raise with respect to the unemployment benefit, very important to the president to provide that extra $600 a week in unemployment payments for people who are having to leave the workplace for the national health right now. But it's important for people to understand that if there's a job available for you, then that benefit is no longer available. You can't quit a job in order to get unemployment. And similarly, as we reopen and safe and healthy workplaces are there, we want people back in those workplaces.
In other words, you can't refuse to go back to work if the job becomes available to you and retain that $600 benefit.
That's right. If that's a job that you can go back to, and of course go back to safely, then you can't remain on unemployment insurance. We've discussed that with the states that administer these programs. They understand the importance of the integrity of this program and also of bringing Americans back to work. And our Inspector General at the Labor Department will also be looking into whether that aspect of the program is misused.
But I am sure you can see why some employers are concerned that there is a disincentive to return to work because the unemployment benefit pays them more, for example, in many hospitality industry jobs than they would have made on the job.
That does happen in some cases, and it is an issue to keep an eye on. Totally understood. We are focused on it. We are helping the states focus on it. But again, it's so important also to be providing that safety net to workers right now.
Mr. Secretary, we thank you for your time. We appreciate your efforts today on a day that we will all remember, and I'm sure you will too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All righty. Eugene Scalia is the Secretary of Labor.